Political violence is only acceptable when the right does it through systematic oppression. Thank you for this comment. I think this is a really important thing for us to remember. In this conversation about Charlie Kirk's demise, a lot of people are saying we need to be careful to frame this as political violence and not gun violence. Well, one, I think that makes a weird false binary because guns are often used for political violence, and you cannot talk about firearms in the United States and their use and have it not be political. The mechanism through which a significant amount of political violence is done is with firearms. So I think it is gun violence and also political violence at the same time. But then I'm starting to see this conflation of we need to call it political violence. It's an assassination. It's political violence. First of all, we don't know anything about the shooter yet. They've not been apprehended. We don't know what their motivations were. But people are very content to write a fiction in their heads on both sides, right? I'm seeing people on the political right who are saying, oh, this was a liberal and liberals are so mean and hateful. And then I'm seeing people on the left be like, this person is like a next Mario's brother. We just don't know anything, and I don't think it's particularly useful. In fact, I think it can be pretty harmful for us to try and speculate. But we would be remiss in thinking that what happened to Charlie Kirk today is the only way that political violence happens, or to think that this is like the first instance of political violence that we've seen since this regime has taken over. I think we would be also wrong to presume that political violence is individuals within a society or even a group of people, right? Like January 6th, obviously that was political violence. But to believe that it is individuals or groups in the society versus the vast majority of political violence is done by the system, is done by the government, is done by the men in power, especially the men who are running this regime, men and women. When I saw this comment, I actually had to go back and find a video that was in my reshares that I thought perfectly addresses this, and I want to share it with you real quick.
So for anyone saying this will lead to political violence, I just need to remind you that political violence isn't just when political figures are targeted. Political violence is also violence perpetrated by the state. So this idea that it's going to lead, or a violent political act is going to lead to violence, is technically correct, but the violence has already been happening for a long time. And this violence will be indiscriminate, and it will cut both ways. Okay, that's all I'm going to say on this.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. What was done to Charlie Kirk today? Political violence. What will come in the following days and weeks will also be political violence. And do not be fooled into thinking that the right and the regime, they will use Charlie's death to make a martyr out of him. I anticipate that, at least. And they will definitely use it as a justification for political violence enacted by the regime or enacted by fringe alt-right groups. And actually, one more point to make, one more thing I want to tie in here when we're looking at political violence, either by individuals or by the state. And while the incident that we saw today shocks a lot of people because it's not been normalized, school shootings totally normalized. We're not seeing very much coverage of the school shooting today in Colorado because that has been so normalized. We are so immune to the horrors of that occurring on a regular basis in the United States. But likewise, the political violence enacted by the state against us is something that we've been very conditioned to accept. That also is extremely normalized for us, and we are somewhat blind to the reality that that's what's happening to us. I think with the Trump regime coming to power, we are better able to understand how some of the more extreme actions are definitely political violence, but I think a fair number of folks have yet to connect the fact that a lot of the violence that the Trump regime is doing now is just a logical extension of what's been going on for a long time. It's just a natural progression of the systematic oppression of the political violence that has been sanctioned by our government and definitely by the right in our government for decades on a local, state, and federal level. But it's not just our government, right? Because we live in a society where corporate and special interest drives so much of what our government does. Since Citizens United was overturned, it's billionaires, it's mega corporations, it is those who have a vested interest in profiting off of this kind of violence who are driving it and are perpetuating it. They are the ones funding our legislators to put forth policies that will make it much easier to oppress us so that those corporations can extract more and more of our dollars, our life hours from us. With that in mind, I want you to watch this clip from Rachel because I think her reaction to what happened today, I agree with her 100%.
No one should be sacrificed in the name of the gun lobby. No one. Zero people. I do not think that anyone should be sacrificed in the name of the gun lobby. That is a place where Charlie Kirk and I disagree. I disagree with Charlie Kirk. May he rest. And I do not think it is worth a cost of human lives to defend an interpretation of the Second Amendment that has been paid for by the NRA. No one wins from increased militarization and weaponization of the United States except for the people that manufacture the guns. So I think it's worth paying attention to who is using this moment to call for increased political violence, particularly who in positions of power and authority is calling actively for increases in political violence, and what they say about other forms of political violence when they choose to speak about it at all. But I just think that if your whole shtick is some people have to die for the sake of gun rights, but you are not willing to accept anyone that you view as one of your own as a victim of that kind of violence, just think that perhaps you believe that only everyday Americans, people in working class communities, Black and brown people, and Democrats should suffer the harms of gun violence.
Absolutely, 1,000,000% completely agree with this take. Everything she said, agree with it. It is the gun lobby, it's the NRA, it's the gun manufacturers who benefit from the society that we live in. They are the ones who are perfectly happy to sacrifice people all over the place, including the Charlie Kirks of the world. They have pushed their interpretation of the Second Amendment, not because it's accurate, not because it benefits all of us, but because it increases their profit. 2023, Charlie Kirk did say, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. He just didn't think it was going to be him, right? He didn't think it was going to happen to him. And at the end of the day, the NRA gun manufacturers, billionaire business owners who profit by more and more and more people stockpiling more and more weapons, who benefit from this kind of arms race and escalation of political violence in our country, they not only see Charlie Kirk's death as a cost of having their interpretation of the Second Amendment, they see it as a benefit. They see it as something that will further their agenda and maximize their profit margin. Everything in our society comes back to capitalism. Everything in our society comes back to corporations, CEOs, billionaires profiting off of our suffering and our death. All of it comes back to systemic oppression of working class people so that the super rich can become even more obscenely wealthy. I think we would be hard-pressed to find any political violence in the United States that does not have a corporate profit-driven motivation behind it. Look at the Trump regime. Everything they're doing is a grift. Everything is to benefit the super rich, to benefit corporations and billionaires with those sweet, sweet government contracts, sucking up our tax dollars and using the brutalization of American people, of immigrants in this country, of poor people around the world as a perfectly valid justification to take away our rights, to exploit us, to take away our hard-earned tax dollars. It's all interconnected. Political violence in the United States of America has a capitalistic cause. And everything the Trump regime does, capitalism is at the heart of it. Grifting is at the heart of it. It's all interconnected. It's all interconnected. There are no isolated instances of political violence. There's no isolated instances of gun violence in this society. The government will use it to their advantage, and corporations will use the government to use it to their advantage.